My name is Nora, and I'm 27 years old. A woman I'd never seen before looked right at me and said, "You're my daughter." I wanted to tell her she was mistaken because my mother died before I was even born. But when I found an old childhood drawing of that same woman, I realized this wasn't confusion or grief. It was something far darker. Someone had rewritten my life, and I was about to uncover why. I live in a quiet coastal town called Windmere Bay, a place where the wind smells of salt and the waves hum like a lullaby against the rocks. My life, until recently, was perfectly ordinary. I worked from home as a freelance illustrator, sketching seaside cottages and watercolor portraits for tourists who wanted a piece of Windmere to take home. I thought I knew who I was, who I'd always been. But that illusion shattered on a rainy afternoon when a stranger looked into my eyes and claimed she was my mother. My adoptive mother, June, raised me with tenderness and quiet strength. She always said I'd been a blessing from tragedy. I knew she wasn't my biological mother, but she told me my birth mother had died before I was born. It sounded impossible, yet she said it with such conviction that I never questioned it. I grew up thinking maybe she meant before I came into her life, not before I was born. But sometimes when I closed my eyes, I'd see flashes of another woman, a gentle face framed by auburn hair, humming beneath a great willow tree. Her name echoed in my head, Ilara. I had no idea where the name came from, yet it felt as natural as breathing. Ever since I was a child, these memories would visit me like ghostly whispers, Ilara brushing my hair, Ilara singing a lullaby I didn't recognize, Ilara saying, "Always look for the light through the leaves." June used to smile when I talked about her imaginary dream mother, but there was always a flicker of fear behind her eyes, as if she knew more than she let on. That afternoon, I was sitting by the window at my favorite cafe, sketching a landscape of the cliffs. The rain had just started, turning the glass into rippling sheets. The smell of coffee filled the air, warm and familiar. I was in my own world when I felt someone's gaze on me, sharp, unrelenting, almost desperate. Across the cafe, a woman sat alone at a corner table. She must have been in her early 50s, elegant but weary. Her posture was graceful, yet her fingers trembled as she held her teacup. At first, I thought I was imagining things. Then she stood up and began walking toward me. My chest tightened. I had no reason to be afraid, yet every instinct screamed that something was about to change. She stopped beside my table, her voice trembling. You're my daughter." I blinked. "I'm sorry. What?" Her eyes filled with tears as she whispered, "You're my daughter, Nora." For a moment I thought it was some sick mistake. Maybe she'd lost a child once, and grief made her confuse me with someone else. But there was something in her eyes, something hauntingly familiar. A pull in my chest I couldn't explain. My heart pounded as I stared back at her. "I think you have the wrong person," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, smiling through tears. "No, darling, I'd know you anywhere." "Who are you?" I managed to ask. "My name is Vivian," she said softly. "Vivian Lane. I gave birth to you 27 years ago at St. Gabriel's Hospital." The name sent a shiver down my spine. St. Gabriel's. That was the hospital June said had burned down years ago, the one where I was supposedly born. I felt dizzy. The cafe around me blurred, the rain outside dissolving into streaks of color. "That's not possible," I said. My birth mother, died before I was born." Vivian's lips trembled. "Who told you that?" "My mom," I said. "June." At the mention of June's name, Vivian's face darkened. Her expression twisted into something between pain and fury. She opened her mouth, then stopped herself, her eyes searching mine like she was looking for something hidden beneath the surface. "June," she whispered bitterly, almost to herself. I stood up, backing away. "I think you should leave." "Nora, please," she said, her voice breaking. "There's so much you don't know." I grabbed my sketchbook and rushed out into the rain before she could say another word. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. The cold drops stung my skin as I ran down the street. I didn't stop until I reached home, our small white house near the dunes. Inside, everything was exactly as it always was. the smell of lavender candles, the ticking of the old clock, June's framed cross-stitch on the wall that said, "Home is where the heart is." But I felt like a stranger in my own life. I leaned against the door, dripping and shaking. My mind kept replaying her words. "You're my daughter?" It couldn't be true. June had told me everything. She'd shown me the adoption papers, the baby photos, the birth certificate. Yet, those strange dreams. The name Alara. The way Vivian's eyes seemed to mirror something inside me I couldn't name. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Vivian's face and heard her trembling voice. Around midnight, I got up, pulled out an old box from the closet, and started digging through my childhood things. Drawings, report cards, a few old toys. Near the bottom, I found a small stack of papers tied with a faded blue ribbon, my early sketches. One in particular made my stomach drop. It was a crayon drawing of a woman standing under a large willow tree, smiling down at a little girl who looked exactly like me. The woman had long auburn hair and eyes that seemed to hold secrets. I turned the paper over. In the shaky handwriting of a child, I'd scrawled, "Mommy Vivian." I sat frozen, staring at the drawing. I couldn't remember making it. I couldn't remember ever hearing the name Vivian before today. Yet there it was, in my own handwriting. The air in the room grew heavy. For a moment, I swore I could hear faint humming, the same lullaby from my dreams. My hand trembled as I held the drawing closer. "Who are you?" I whispered into the dark. But deep down, beneath the fear, a part of me already knew the answer. That night, I find an old childhood drawing of a woman who looks exactly like Vivienne. Every memory I had of my mother began to shift, like the past itself was being rewritten. The next morning, I sat across from June at our kitchen table, the drawing still lying between us like an accusation. She was stirring sugar into her coffee, pretending to read the paper, but her hands were shaking. I waited for her to look up, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Finally, I broke the silence. "Who is Vivian?" Her spoon froze mid-stir. A few seconds passed before she said quietly, "Where did you hear that name?" "At the cafe yesterday," I said. "A woman came up to me. She said she's my mother." June's face went pale, and for a moment I thought she might faint. Then her expression hardened. "She's no one, Nora. Stay away from her." "That's not an answer," I said, my voice trembling. She slammed her mug down, spilling coffee across the table. "I said stay away from her!" Her sudden outburst made me flinch. June was never like this, never angry, never loud. She'd always been calm, gentle, controlled, but now her eyes flashed with something close to fear. "She's dangerous," June continued, standing up abruptly. "She doesn't know what she's talking about. Promise me you won't see her again." "Why?" I asked, standing too. "What are you afraid of?" She hesitated. "She'll confuse you. She always does." "Confuse me about what?" June turned away, pressing her hands against the counter. "Please, Nora, let it go." But I couldn't. Not now, not after everything. That night, sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the willow tree from my dreams, its long branches swaying like arms reaching out for me. Beneath it stood Alara, her auburn hair glinting in the moonlight. She was humming that same soft lullaby. I tried to remember the words, but they slipped away like water through my fingers. Then she looked at me, her eyes full of sadness, and whispered, "They lied to you." I woke with a start, heart pounding, sweat soaking my sheets. The clock read 3:12 a.m. I sat up and rubbed my eyes, but the whisper still echoed in my mind. "They lied to you." The next morning I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. While June was out running errands, I went into the attic, a place I hadn't visited since I was a kid. The air was heavy with dust and memories. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, labeled in June's neat handwriting. Christmas, school years, photos, family. I pulled out the photo boxes and began flipping through albums. My childhood stared back at me in faded colors, beach trips, birthdays, and endless photos of June smiling beside me. But as I looked closer, I noticed something strange. There were almost no pictures of my first year. Between the labels 1997 and 1998, there was only one torn photo tucked between pages. I pulled it out carefully. In it, June stood beside another woman, tall, striking, with auburn hair and familiar eyes. My stomach twisted. She looked just like Vivian. The corner of the picture had been ripped, but on the back, in faded ink, someone had written, "Summer, 1997, The Exchange." I froze. The exchange. Between whom? What did that mean? My heart raced as I turned the photo over again. Both women were smiling, but there was something forced about it, something uneasy. June's hand gripped the other woman's wrist too tightly, as if she wasn't letting her go. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at their faces. I didn't know what scared me more, the fact that Vivian was standing next to June, or that June had tried to erase the evidence. I needed answers. The next day, I went to the Windermere Town Archives, a small gray building near the courthouse. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of old paper. A kind-faced clerk named Mara asked if she could help. "I'm looking for adoption records," I said. "Mine, specifically. I was adopted in 1997. She led me to a desk and began typing. "Name?" "Nora Quinn." Her fingers paused. "Quinn, that's an old record," she frowned. "Some files from that year were sealed after the fire at St. Gabriel's Hospital." My chest tightened. "Sealed? Why?" "There were irregularities," Mara said carefully. "Lost records, missing birth certificates. You know how things were back then." I tried to sound calm. "Can I see what's left of my file?" "I'm sorry," she said softly. "Access requires a court order, but—" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "If I were you, I'd look into St. Gabriel's directly. The fire didn't destroy everything. The hospital burned down years ago," she nodded. "Yes, but not before certain files were moved. Some of the staff kept personal copies. If you can find one of them, you might find what you're looking for." I hesitated. "Do you know anyone who worked there in 1997? Mara's eyes flickered toward the door, as if checking who might be listening. "I shouldn't say this, but one name came up more than once when we sorted the archives, a nurse named Vivian Lane." My breath caught. "Vivian worked there?" Mara nodded slowly. "She was listed as head nurse in the maternity ward, up until the fire." The room seemed to tilt for a moment. I steadied myself against the desk. Vivian wasn't just some stranger claiming me. She had been there when I was born. My voice was barely a whisper. "What happened to her after the fire?" Mara shook her head. "No record. Some say she left town. Others say she disappeared altogether." I thanked her and left the archives, but my hands were trembling as I stepped outside. The autumn air felt colder than usual, sharp against my skin. Vivian had been there, at the hospital, on the day my life began. It wasn't coincidence. It couldn't be. I walked home in a daze, the world around me blurring into background noise. The questions swirled endlessly in my mind. Why had June lied? What was the exchange? And why had my memories of Alara always felt so real? That night, as I sat by my window, watching the waves crash in the distance, I felt a deep unease settle in my chest. My life, my memories, my family, suddenly felt like a story someone else had written for me. And now, piece by piece, the ink was fading. I learned that Vivian once worked at St. Gabriel's, the same hospital where I was born. The hospital where I was born had burned down years ago. But some secrets don't die in flames. By the time I reached the outskirts of town, the sky was the color of lead. The air smelled like rain and rust, like something that had been forgotten too long. The road curved around a stretch of cliffs before revealing what was left of St. Gabriel's Hospital. The building stood like a skeleton against the horizon. Half collapsed, its windows shattered, its once white walls now gray and overgrown with ivy. The locals avoided this place, whispering about hauntings and curses, but I wasn't afraid of ghosts. Not anymore. I was afraid of the truth. I parked the car beside the broken front gate and grabbed my flashlight. The moment I stepped out, the wind howled through the cracked walls, carrying a faint echo that sounded almost like a woman humming. For a split second I thought of Alara, and that same familiar chill ran down my spine. The main doors were chained shut, but one side hung loose enough for me to slip through. Inside, the smell hit me first, a mix of soot, mold, and old chemicals. My footsteps echoed through empty hallways lined with peeling paint and scorched signage. "Maternity wing, Ward C." One sign read, its arrow half burned away, Ward C, the same ward the archive clerk had mentioned. I moved slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through clouds of dust. Broken gurneys and rusted IV stands lay scattered across the floor like corpses of the past. The silence pressed in around me, so thick it felt alive. Near what must have been the nurse's station, I spotted a metal cabinet toppled on its side, drawers hanging open. Inside were fragments of old files, burned, blackened, and half-melted together. I crouched down and started pulling them apart gently, my heart pounding in my throat. Most of them were illegible, names and numbers swallowed by fire. But then, among the ashes, one page was still mostly intact. Patient name, Elara Quinn. Date of admission, August 14th, 1997. Diagnosis, complications during late-term pregnancy. Notes, condition unstable, emergency transfer recommended. My hand trembled as I traced the letters, Elara Quinn, the name from my dreams. The woman who sang to me before I could ever remember hearing her voice. She was real, and she had been here, on the day I was born. I turned the page over and found another note, written hastily, the ink smudged from heat and time. Infant transferred to Ward C, supervised by Nurse V. Lane. My breath caught. V. Lane, Vivian Lane. For a moment, the world tilted. The faint hum of wind through the broken windows grew louder, like a whisper echoing down the hall. I stood there, frozen, clutching the paper as though it might vanish if I let go. Vivian wasn't lying. At least not entirely. She had been there. She had been with me. But why? Why would a nurse supervise the transfer of a newborn unless something had gone terribly wrong? And why had June tried so hard to bury this? I sank to the floor, my flashlight wobbling in my hand. Images swirled in my head. Elara's lullabies, Vivian's trembling hands, June's terrified eyes. I didn't know what to believe anymore. The walls seemed to close in around me, groaning with the weight of the years. I forced myself to take deep breaths. Okay, I whispered to no one. Just document everything. I pulled out my phone and started taking photos of the burned cabinets, the partially intact records, the name Elara Quinn. I wanted proof. Proof that my memories weren't some delusion. Proof that the woman in my dreams had existed beyond my mind. When I stood up to leave, the flashlight beam caught something on the far wall. An old plaque, blackened but still legible. St. Gabriel's maternity wing, dedicated to the mothers who gave life within these walls. The irony made my throat tighten. Life had begun here, but it felt like death had never left. I started back toward the main corridor, the sound of my footsteps echoing too loudly. Outside, the rain had begun to fall, tapping against broken glass. I pushed through the warped doors and stepped into the open air, grateful for the cool sting of it on my skin. But as I approached my car, I froze. Someone was standing beside it. Through the drizzle, I recognized her instantly. Vivian. She wasn't wearing makeup this time. Her hair was damp, her expression drawn and tired. She looked older than before, more fragile somehow, but her eyes still held that same desperate intensity. "How did you know I was here?" I asked, my voice barely steady. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me with that mix of sorrow and guilt that made my stomach twist. "You weren't supposed to find this place," she said finally, her voice cracking. I tightened my grip on my phone, the photos still open on the screen. "You were here," I said. "At the hospital. Your name is on the record." Her lips parted, but no words came out. "Who was Elara?" I demanded. "And what does she have to do with me?" Vivian stepped closer, her eyes glistening. "Please, Nora, there are things you don't understand." "Then make me understand," I shouted. The sound of my voice startled even me. "You said you're my mother. But that woman, Elara, she's in my memories. I see her, I hear her. How is that possible?" Tears welled in Vivian's eyes. For a moment, I thought she might tell me everything, but then she shook her head slowly, like she was talking to herself as much as to me. "You weren't supposed to find out this way," she whispered. Lightning flashed behind her, illuminating the ruins in stark white. For a heartbeat, she looked like a ghost, half in this world, half out of it. "What way?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What are you hiding from me?" But Vivian only looked at me with that same unbearable sadness. I tried to protect you, Nora. I really did. Then she turned, walked toward her car, and drove away, leaving me standing in the rain, clutching a burned piece of paper that proved everything I knew about my life had been a lie. I stared after her, heart hammering, soaked to the bone, my mind spinning with fear and fury. Who was Vivienne Lane really? And what had she done to me 27 years ago inside that burning hospital? Vivienne says, "You weren't supposed to find out this way." Vivienne finally told me the truth, or at least her version of it. 2 days passed before I saw Vivienne. I didn't plan it. I was driving back from the grocery store when I spotted her car, an old, parked near the cliffs overlooking the ocean. Something in me hesitated, but curiosity, or maybe desperation, won out. I pulled over beside her. She was sitting behind the wheel, staring out at the crashing waves. When she noticed me, she wiped her eyes quickly, as though she didn't want to be caught crying. "Get in, Nora," she said softly. I hesitated, my pulse quickening. Why should I? Because you deserve to know what really happened. I didn't know why, but I opened the door and slid into the passenger seat. The car smelled faintly of lavender and old leather, like someone who still tried to hold on to pieces of the past. Vivienne's hands trembled as she gripped the steering. "I've gone over this moment in my mind for years," she said, "trying to find the right way to tell you. There isn't one." I waited, my eyes fixed. The waves seemed merciless, devouring the cliffs below. "Ilara," and her voice cracking, "was my sister." My heart skipped. She nodded, tears glistening on her. "Yes, she was 5 years younger than me. Brilliant, kind, stubborn as hell. She worked as a patient counselor at St. That even the most broken souls deserved light." Vivienne took a shaky breath. "When she got pregnant, she was different, secretive. She wouldn't tell anyone who the father was, not even me. But she was happy, I could tell. She used to hum to her belly and say, 'She knows me already.'" I listened, my chest tight. Every word painted Ilara in vivid strokes, matching the woman in my dreams. Vivienne continued, her tone darkening. "But something went wrong during labor. The hospital made mistakes, too many to count. The doctor left mid-procedure. The equipment malfunctioned. It was chaos. Ilara went into cardiac arrest." Her voice broke. "They couldn't save her." I swallowed hard. "And me?" Her eyes filled with a terrible tenderness. "You were premature, barely breathing. I was the head nurse that night. When they covered Ilara's body, I couldn't leave her. I looked at you, and I saw her. I couldn't let them take you to the orphanage, not after what they'd done." She turned toward me fully then, her expression raw. "The hospital wanted to cover it up. They didn't want an investigation, not with their negligence, so I—" She paused, trembling. "I took you. I registered you under my name. I did it to protect you." I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. It sounded almost plausible. Almost. "You stole me," I whispered. Vivienne flinched. "I saved you." The words hung in the air between us, heavy and electric. I wanted to scream, to demand proof, but she was crying, really crying now. "June was supposed to help me," she said suddenly. "She worked in hospital administration back then. I thought I could trust her, but she betrayed me." My stomach twisted. "How?" "She took you from me when the hospital board started asking questions. She told me it was temporary, that she'd keep you safe until things quieted down. But she never gave you back." That didn't fit. June had raised me as her own, yes, but she'd never seemed like a thief. Still, the tremor in Vivienne's voice felt too real to dismiss entirely. "I wanted to find you sooner," she whispered. "But June moved you, changed your name, hid you from everyone who might have known the truth." My head spun. I wanted to believe her. Part of me needed to. "Why should I trust you?" I asked quietly. Vivienne reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small silver locket, worn and dented with age. She placed it in my hand. "It belonged to Ilara," she said. I opened it slowly. Inside was a faded photograph. 2 young women smiling at the camera. One was clearly Vivienne, younger and freer. The other had auburn hair and eyes that seemed alive even through the years of wear. Ilara. Below the picture, etched into the metal, was a small spiral symbol, intricate and unfamiliar. "What is this?" I asked, tracing the spiral with my thumb. Vivian looked away. It's personal. Something from our family. Ilara wore it always. She turned back to me, her tone shifting, suddenly firm, almost fearful. Nora, please. You have to stop digging. It's only going to hurt you. June isn't who you think she is. Her warning sent a chill through me. What are you saying? Just let the past stay buried, she said. There are things about that night, about the hospital. You don't want to know. But I do want to know, I insisted. I deserve to know who I am. Vivian's expression hardened. Knowing won't set you free. It'll destroy you. I sat in silence, clutching the locket. The waves outside seemed louder now, crashing harder against the cliffs. I thought of Ilara, of her lullabies, of the whisper in my dream. They lied to you. Was Vivian telling me the truth? Or was this just another lie, layered over years of guilt? Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I opened the car door. I need time, I said quietly. Vivian didn't try to stop me. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. If you love your life as it is, Nora, don't ask June about the spiral. The door shut with a dull thud. The sound lingered in my ears as I walked back to my car. The entire drive home felt like a blur. My thoughts spun in circles. Ilara, the hospital, Vivian's story, the spiral. Every piece seemed to fit, yet something inside me whispered that it wasn't complete. When I got home, I sat on my bed, turning the locket over and over in my hands. The spiral glinted faintly in the lamplight, hypnotic, endless. I pressed it to my chest and closed my eyes. Sleep found me eventually, but it was anything but peaceful. In my dream, I was standing beneath the willow tree again. Ilara was there, smiling sadly. But when she reached for me, her face began to blur and shift, her features melting until Vivian's face stared back at me instead. She's lying, the voice whispered. I jolted awake, gasping, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The room was dark, the wind rattling the window pane. For a moment, I thought I was still dreaming, until I saw it. A single envelope lay on the floor, pushed halfway under my door. My hands shook as I picked it up. Inside was a slip of paper, the handwriting unfamiliar but firm. It read, Ask June about the spiral. I wake up to find a note slipped under my door. Ask June about the spiral. The deeper I went, the more I realized I wasn't uncovering my past. I was walking straight into someone else's secrets. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains when I finally gathered the courage to face June again. The note from under my door burned in my pocket, its message echoing in my mind. Ask June about the spiral. I walked into the kitchen, where she was pouring coffee like any other day. The familiar smell that once felt comforting now made me nauseous. I found something, I said quietly. She didn't look up. You've been finding a lot of things lately. I placed the silver locket on the table between us. The spiral caught the light, spinning faintly like it was alive. Tell me what this means, I demanded. June's hand froze. The color drained from her face so fast it was like watching life retreat. She reached out slowly, touching the locket with trembling fingers. Where did you get this? Vivian gave it to me, I said. She said it belonged to Ilara. She said you'd understand. June's lips parted, but no words came out. Then she whispered, almost to herself, That symbol should have died with them. Died with who? I asked. She didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted toward the hallway, toward her office, where she kept a small safe behind a painting, something she'd always said contained old documents. June, I pressed, you need to tell me the truth. Who was Ilara, and what does the spiral mean? Finally, she sighed, a sound filled with decades of exhaustion. Sit down, Nora. I obeyed, my pulse quickening. You have to understand, she began slowly. St. Gabriel's wasn't just a hospital. It was an experiment in disguise. I frowned. What do you mean? I worked there, she admitted, her voice small. Not as an administrator like Vivian told you, but as a psychiatric nurse. Back then, there was a research division called Project Persephone. It was supposed to study maternal bonding, but it became something darker. My heart thudded painfully. Darker how? She rubbed her temples as if reliving a nightmare. The goal was to test if emotional memories, love, grief, instinct, could be transferred from one mind to another, between mother and child, between generations. The spiral was their symbol. It represented continuity, an unbroken chain. My throat went dry. You mean, like copying memories? She nodded weakly. Ilara volunteered. She was one of the first subjects. They said it would make the mother-child bond stronger, that the baby would remember love even before birth. I leaned forward, my voice shaking. And did it work? June hesitated. It went too far. Ilara started experiencing memory confusion. She claimed she could see things through her unborn child's eyes. She'd wake screaming, describing scenes that hadn't happened yet. Then, near the end of her pregnancy, something went wrong. The procedure destabilized her neural patterns. She began to lose herself. I stared at her, horrified. Are you saying the experiment killed her? Tears filled June's eyes. The doctors tried to stop it, but it was too late. Her body went into shock. She didn't survive the delivery. The room tilted slightly, my vision blurring around the edges. I remembered the dreams, the lullabies, the willow tree, the warmth of a mother's voice I'd never met. Then how do I remember her? I asked, barely able to speak. How do I remember things she said before I was even born? June's gaze dropped to the locket. Because part of her is inside you. That was the point of Persephone, to pass the mother's consciousness, even fragments of her emotional core, to the child. I could barely breathe. Are you saying my memories aren't real? They're real to you, June said softly, but they didn't start in you. I stood up so fast the chair scraped against the tile. That's insane. June didn't argue. She just looked at me with something like guilt and fear. Vivian was supposed to shut it down after Ilara's death, June continued. She destroyed most of the records, but during the chaos of the fire, she took me. I finished for her, my voice trembling. June nodded miserably. She always thought she could fix it, that she could finish what Ilara started. My blood ran cold. Finish it? I was a baby. She loved her sister, June said weakly. In her mind, taking you was saving Ilara's legacy. No, I said, shaking my head. She wasn't saving anyone. She was playing God. June's silence was the only confirmation I needed. I slammed my hand against the table. Who am I, June? Tell me the truth. Who am I really? She stood slowly, tears streaking her face. Without another word, she walked to her office. I followed her down the hall, my heart pounding. She reached behind the painting of the lighthouse and opened the safe I'd seen her guard all my life. Inside was a thick folder marked Subject N in faded ink. June hesitated, then handed it to me. You have the right to see this. I sat down at her desk and opened the folder. Inside were medical charts, psychological reports, and old photographs of a newborn baby, me, connected to machines, wires snaking across my tiny body. I flipped through the pages, my stomach turning. A document near the end caught my eye. Birth name, Nora Quinn. Mother, Ilara Quinn. So Vivian hadn't lied about that much. Ilara was my mother. But when I reached the last page, a detail made my breath catch. Supervisor approval signature, Vivian Lane. The room seemed to spin. She was part of the experiment, I whispered. Not just a nurse. She ran it. June didn't meet my gaze. Vivian was the lead researcher. My hands trembled as I turned the paper toward her. Then what does that make me, June? A person? A project? An experiment that got away? She said nothing. I laughed bitterly through the tears. All these years you raised me like I was yours, and you never told me I was... What? A science experiment? A memory test? Nora, she said gently, you're more than that. You're her daughter. You're both of them in a way. That's what Ilara wanted. Her words felt like poison. I shoved the folder back into the safe, my pulse racing, my head filled with fragments that didn't fit together anymore. Vivian hadn't just been protecting me. She'd been studying me, watching me, measuring how much of Ilara lived on inside me. I stormed toward the door, desperate for air. June called after me, but I didn't turn around. My vision blurred as I stepped outside, the world spinning beneath my feet. The sea breeze hit my face, sharp and cold, but it couldn't clear the sickness inside me. I clutched the locket until it dug into my palm, the spiral symbol glinting faintly in the sunlight, a reminder of the loop I was trapped in. I wasn't uncovering my past anymore. I was reliving someone else's obsession. And somewhere, deep down, I knew. Vivienne wasn't done with me yet. I realized Vivienne wasn't protecting me. She was experimenting on me. I thought I was the daughter of a tragedy, but I was the creation of an experiment. The sky was bruised with clouds when I pulled up outside Vivienne's house. It stood on a lonely stretch of road overlooking the bay, its white paint peeling, curtains drawn tight as if it had been holding its breath for years. I hadn't planned to come here again, but after what I'd learned from June, there was no stopping the storm inside me. I needed answers, and I was done waiting for someone else to decide what I deserved to know. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside, the smell of salt and fading roses thick in the air. The house was eerily silent except for the faint hum of the wind slipping through cracked window panes. Vivienne appeared from the hallway, wearing a faded sweater and holding a cup of tea that she didn't seem to notice had gone cold. When she saw me, she didn't look surprised. If anything, she looked almost relieved. "I knew you'd come," she said softly. "You've always known the truth, haven't you?" My throat tightened. "No," I snapped. "But I'm ready to hear it. All of it." She motioned for me to sit, but I stayed standing. "What did you do to me, Vivienne?" Her eyes shimmered with tears. "I did what I had to save her." "Ilara," I said. Vivienne nodded slowly. "She was too good for this world. The doctors gave up on her, but I couldn't. I couldn't let her die. She wasn't just my sister. She was everything I wished I could be. She believed love could outlive death." Her voice cracked, and she set the cup down with shaking hands. When her heart stopped, I made a promise. I told her I'd find a way to keep her alive, and I did. A chill crept up my spine. "What are you talking about?" Vivienne's gaze met mine, unwavering. "You've always felt her, haven't you? The songs, the willow tree, the memories you couldn't explain. They weren't dreams, Nora." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "They were her." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean, her?" "Ilara," she whispered. "She lives inside you." I took a step back. "That's insane." "No," she said, shaking her head, fiercely. "It's science. It's Persephone. I couldn't save her body, but I could preserve her neural patterns, her memories, her emotions, her essence. I used her DNA, her cognitive maps, her maternal imprints. I gave them a new vessel." I felt my knees weaken. "A new vessel," I repeated numbly. "You mean me?" Tears slipped down Vivienne's cheeks. "You're not just her daughter, Nora." She smiled through the grief, her expression both loving and horrifying. "You are her." For a moment the room spun. The ticking of a nearby clock sounded too loud. The shadows seemed to close in around me. I wanted to scream, to run, to deny every word she said. But deep down, something inside me recognized the lullabies, the dreams, the feeling that my memories didn't belong entirely to me. I staggered toward the wall, clutching it for balance. "You're saying I'm, what, a copy? A clone?" Vivienne flinched at the word. "Not a copy. A continuation. Ilara's life didn't end. It was reborn through you, through her own child." I couldn't breathe. My mind filled with flickering images. Ilara's face under the willow, Vivienne's trembling hands at the hospital, June's confession about Project Persephone. Vivienne continued, her voice trembling with devotion and guilt. "Her neural transference was the most successful we'd ever seen. Her memory engrams aligned almost perfectly with your developing brain. That's why you dream her dreams, remember her songs. You're her mind and her blood intertwined." "Stop it," I whispered. "You stole my life." Vivienne shook her head, tears spilling freely now. "I gave you life." "You gave me confusion," I shot back. "You made me a ghost wearing someone else's face." She stepped closer, reaching for my arm, but I jerked away. "Don't touch me." Vivienne's voice cracked, raw with desperation. "You don't understand. I did it for love. Ilara begged me not to let her die. She wanted to see you grow, to live in you somehow. I made that happen. I kept her alive." "You didn't save her," I said through clenched teeth. "You trapped her." Vivienne's face crumpled. "Please, Nora. Everything I did to protect what she was, what you are. I'm not her, I screamed. My voice echoed through the house, rattling the framed photographs on the walls. For the first time, Vivienne looked frightened. She took a step back, clutching her chest. Nora, listen to me. Your existence proves Persephone works. You're proof of Alara's love. No, I said, my voice shaking. I'm proof of your obsession. The silence that followed felt suffocating. My entire existence, every laugh, every dream, every ache, suddenly felt borrowed, manufactured. Vivienne turned away, fumbling with something on the desk behind her. She opened a drawer and pulled out a leather-bound journal, its pages yellowed with age. You want proof? She said quietly. Read this. I hesitated, then took it from her. The cover read, Persephone, Neural Transference Trials. Inside, the pages were filled with diagrams of brain scans, notes on emotional imprinting, and detailed observations labeled Subject N. My name appeared again and again, written in Vivienne's careful script. Next to one entry, in red ink, was a line that made my stomach twist. Cognitive resonance increasing. Subject displays emotional recall of donor's memories. Partial success. Proceed with Phase 2. The handwriting shook near the bottom of the page, as though written during panic or guilt. I flipped further and saw a series of entries documenting Ilara's final days. Her confusion, her fading sense of identity, her last words. She will remember me. My eyes burned with tears. You used her, I said, and me. Vivienne's voice broke. No, I honored her. I slammed the journal shut. You're insane. She reached for me again, but I backed toward the door. Please, she begged. Don't let June twist this. She wanted to destroy Persephone, to erase what we created. What you created, I spat. You didn't just play with lives. You made one. Vivienne's tears fell silently now. I made you. Her words hit like a knife. I turned and walked out before I could break apart completely. The air outside felt too thin, too sharp. I gulped it down, dizzy with rage and grief. I wanted to run, to drive until the world made sense again. But as I started the engine, something tugged at me. The journal still sat on the passenger seat where I dropped it. Against my better judgment, I opened it again, flipping through the pages in a haze until I reached the final entry. At the bottom of the last page, a heading was scrawled in fresh ink, Project Persephone, Phase 2, June. My heart froze. Phase 2, June. The realization hit like lightning. Vivienne wasn't finished. Whatever she had done to Alara, she had planned to continue with June. And if I didn't stop her, I wasn't sure who would. I find another name in her notes. Project Persephone, Phase 2, June. If Vivienne had turned me into Alara's rebirth, what had she done to June? Sleep didn't come that night. The wind howled against my windows like a restless spirit, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw those words burned into my mind. Project Persephone, Phase 2, June. By sunrise, I was already dressed, the journal clutched tightly in my hands. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had to know what Vivienne meant. What had she done to June? And why did she call it Phase 2? When I reached home, the house was quiet. June was still asleep in her room, her door slightly ajar. For a long moment, I stood in the hallway watching her breathe, wondering how many lies she'd told me in the name of love. Then I turned and went down to the basement. The air was cold and damp. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting pale light across shelves filled with boxes. Most were labeled, harmlessly, Christmas, tax records, old books, but one caught my attention immediately. A steel chest sat beneath the stairs, its surface covered in dust, the edges reinforced with old brass clasps. Unlike the others, this one was locked. Vivienne's voice echoed in my head. Don't let June twist this. My hands shook as I searched for a way to open it. I checked the drawers, the workbench, even behind a stack of paint cans. Finally, I found a small ring of keys hidden in a mason jar full of screws. The lock clicked open. Inside the chest, wrapped in yellowing cloth, were stacks of files. The first one was stamped in faded ink, Project Persephone, Confidential. My pulse quickened. I pulled one file free and opened it. The pages were filled with medical diagrams, EEG readings, and typed notes. most of them referencing something called neural synchronization through maternal empathy. I skimmed the abstract, my heart hammering harder with each word. Objective: establish simultaneous cognitive resonance between donor and host through emotional mapping. Subject 2, designated for empathic stability. Anticipated result: transference of maternal emotion to preserve donor identity continuity. My eyes darted to the line below. Subject 2, emotional host, June Hall. I froze. June. Subject 2. She wasn't just my caretaker. She was the second part of the experiment. My fingers tightened around the papers as I whispered the words aloud. Emotional host. That's what she'd been. An anchor. A container for someone else's feelings. For Ilara's. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. June hadn't just adopted me out of kindness. She'd been assigned to me, her emotional responses wired to shape mine, to stabilize the transference. My entire childhood, every bedtime story, every comforting hug, had been part of an experiment. I sat back on the cold cement floor, my body trembling. No, I whispered. No, no, no. I kept digging through the chest, desperate for something, anything that would make sense of it. Near the bottom, I found a small box of cassette tapes, each labeled by date. The first one read, Session 3, Donor, Ilara, Host, June. With shaking hands, I grabbed an old tape recorder from a nearby shelf and pressed play. At first, there was only static. Then a faint voice came through, soft and melodic. Can you hear me, June? A woman asked gently. The voice was unmistakable. Ilara. Yes, June's younger voice answered, shaky but calm. Good, Ilara said. Close your eyes. Breathe with me. When I speak, imagine my voice inside your mind. Imagine our thoughts intertwined. Silence followed, then faint sobbing. June's sobbing. It's too much. I can feel you. That's the point, Ilara said. You're meant to. If I don't make it, if something happens, you'll keep me alive through her. Through who? June asked, her voice barely audible. My daughter, Ilara replied. If I die, let her remember me. The tape clicked, and the recording ended. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at the recorder, my skin crawling. June hadn't just been helping Ilara. She'd become part of her, part of me. The air in the basement seemed to close in, pressing against my lungs. I could almost feel both of them, their memories, their grief, their love, circling inside me like ghosts fighting for space. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I turned sharply. June stood at the foot of the stairs, her face pale, eyes glassy with tears. She didn't look angry or shocked, just unbearably sad. You weren't supposed to know, she said quietly. The words cut through me like glass. I rose to my feet slowly. So it's true, I said. You were part of it, all of it. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. Vivian convinced me. She said Ilara's love didn't have to die, that it could live on in you. My voice shook. You let her turn me into a test subject. I didn't know what she was really doing, June whispered. By the time I understood, it was too late. The fire, it wasn't an accident. Her words hung heavy in the air. She burned the hospital down, June said. Vivian wanted to destroy the evidence after Ilara's death. I thought it was over. She looked around the basement, eyes full of regret. But I couldn't let go of what we did, of you. I didn't know whether to scream or collapse. You lied to me my whole life. I raised you because I loved you, June said. Not because of Persephone, not because of Vivian, because you mattered to me. I wanted to believe her, but every word felt tainted now. Every memory rewired by a truth I never asked for. What happened to the others? I asked. The other subjects? They didn't survive, she said, her voice breaking. You were the only one. The silence that followed was unbearable. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator upstairs, the ticking of the old clock, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I looked at the open chest, the tapes, the endless documents. You should have told me, I said quietly. You should have given me the choice. June stepped closer, holding something small in her trembling hand, a rusted key on a silver chain. You still have a choice, she whispered. I frowned. What is this? The final piece, she said. It's buried where it began. Where what began. She didn't answer. She just pressed the key into my palm, her touch warm but trembling. You'll understand when you see it. It's time you decide who you want to be, Nora. Before I could ask another question, she turned and walked upstairs, leaving me standing alone amid the ruins of secrets older than my own name. I stared down at the key in my hand, its teeth etched with the same spiral symbol from Alara's locket. Whatever this opened, it wasn't just a door. It was the truth, buried under decades of lies, waiting for me to dig it up. She hands me a key, saying, "The final piece is buried where it began." The past wasn't buried, it was waiting for me. The drive out to the countryside felt like crossing into another world. The air grew heavier with every mile, thick with the scent of rain-soaked earth and pine. My headlights cut through the mist as the narrow road wound between dark fields and forgotten barns. I didn't need a map. My body knew where to go, even if my mind didn't. The willow from my dreams had always felt real, too vivid to be imagined. Its branches hung low like a curtain of secrets, whispering softly in every vision I'd ever had of Ilara. Now, with June's key heavy in my pocket, I knew exactly where I was headed. When I reached the edge of the clearing, I stopped the car and stepped out into the cold morning air. There it was, the willow, older and larger than I ever could have pictured, its roots twisted deep into the ground like fingers clinging to what the world tried to forget. The wind rustled through its leaves, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice again. Ilara. I approached slowly, the earth soft beneath my shoes. At the base of the tree, half buried under moss and tangled roots, I saw the faint outline of something metallic. My heart pounded as I dropped to my knees, digging with my hands until the mud caked my skin. After several minutes, my fingers hit something solid. A small rusted box, locked tight with an ornate clasp. The same spiral symbol was carved into the lid, its lines worn smooth by time. I pulled the key from my pocket, its metal slick with sweat, and slid it into the lock. The click was faint, but final. Inside, wrapped carefully in faded silk, was a small leather-bound diary. The pages were brittle and yellowed, yet the ink still bled deep and dark into the paper, like the words themselves refused to die. I sat back against the willow's trunk, rain drizzling lightly through the branches, and began to read. The first entry was dated June 2nd, 1997. Vivian says love can be measured, replicated, even preserved. She believes memory is just chemistry and that the heart can be mapped like a machine. I want to believe her, but some things should live and die as they are. My chest tightened as I turned the page. We called it Persephone. It was supposed to bridge the distance between mother and child, to let them understand one another from the moment of birth. But Vivian wants more. She wants to merge souls, not just minds. I told her it isn't love if you can't let go. She doesn't listen anymore. I flipped further, my hands trembling. The entries grew darker, more frantic. She's obsessed. She says I don't understand the gift she's giving me. She says, death doesn't have to be final. I told her I would never allow her to use my baby. She smiled and said she already had. My stomach twisted. The hospital is falling apart around us. I can hear alarms, shouting. Vivian won't stop. She says she can save me, that she can keep me alive through the child. I tried to stop her. I have to stop her. The next page was barely legible, the ink blurred by what looked like water, maybe tears. If this diary survives, let it tell the truth. Vivian crossed the line between love and obsession. She believes she can control life itself. But she's wrong. Some love isn't meant to last. It's meant to be remembered. My heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear the rain anymore. I turned to the final entry, written in shaking handwriting. The fire is spreading. I can smell the smoke from the corridor. I did this. I had to. If my daughter lives, let her choose who to be. Let her choose a life that's hers. The words blurred as my tears hit the page. Alara's final act hadn't been madness. It had been mercy. She burned everything to stop Vivian from turning me into her twisted vision of immortality. My breath caught as a sudden sound cut through the quiet. A soft crunch. Footsteps on wet leaves. I froze, clutching the diary to my chest. Beautiful, isn't it? A voice said behind me. I turned slowly. Vivian stood at the edge of the clearing, her coat soaked through, her hair plastered to her face. Her expression was calm, too calm. In her right hand, she held a small black case. In her left, a syringe glinted faintly in the dim light. "You found it," she said, almost proudly. "I always knew you would." My pulse hammered in my throat. "You did this to her," I said, my voice breaking. "You made her burn everything." Vivian's eyes softened. She didn't understand what she was doing. She was afraid of what she couldn't control. "She was trying to stop you," I said. "She wanted me to have a choice." Vivian smiled sadly, stepping closer. "You were never meant to choose, Nora. You are the choice. You're what we worked for, all of us. Ilara lives through you. You should be grateful." I stumbled back a few steps, gripping the diary so tightly the leather creaked. "You think this is gratitude? You took everything from her. From me." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I gave you eternity." The syringe gleamed in her hand as she raised it, the liquid inside catching the light like mercury. "There's still more to be done," she said. Phase 2 was always about preservation. June was only the beginning. But you— She paused, her eyes burning with something like love. "You're perfection." I shook my head, heart racing. "Stay away from me." Vivian sighed, stepping closer, the syringe steady in her hand. "You'll understand soon. When it's over, you'll feel her completely. No more confusion, no more separation. You and, Ilara will finally be one." My breath came in short, panicked bursts. The rain grew heavier, pelting against my skin as I backed against the willow. My mind screamed for a way out, for something, anything, to stop her. Vivian stopped just a few feet away. Her expression was serene, almost tender. "Don't fight it," she whispered. "This is what you were meant for." The storm cracked above us, lightning splitting the sky. For a single second, the clearing glowed white. I saw everything in that flash. The syringe raised high, her eyes shining with conviction, the diary still open in my hands, Ilara's last words smudged by rain. "If my daughter lives, let her choose who to be." When the thunder rolled, it drowned out my scream. Vivian holds a syringe, whispering, "You were never meant to choose." The woman who created me wanted control. But I was ready to take my life back. The world exploded into lightning. The flash tore through the sky, burning white against the rain-soaked clearing. For a moment, everything froze. Vivian's figure etched in the light, the syringe gleaming in her hand, the willow branches trembling above us like they were trying to warn me. Then she lunged. Her weight slammed into me, knocking us both to the ground. Mud splattered my face as we struggled beneath the willow's roots. The syringe glinted inches from my skin, her voice breaking through the storm. "Hold still," she cried. "I can fix this. I can restore balance." I grabbed her wrist, shoving upward with all my strength. "You mean control," I shouted. Rain poured down harder, soaking us both. The syringe hovered between us, trembling, the needle's tip catching the faint glow of lightning. I could feel her desperation like a living thing. It radiated from her, raw and unhinged. "You're sick," I gasped, pushing against her. "You didn't save her. You destroyed her." Vivian's eyes flared. "No, I saved her," she screamed. "I gave her another chance. You're proof she still lives." The syringe slipped from her grip, tumbling into the mud. We both dove for it at once. My hand closed over hers, slick with rain, and in the struggle I heard the faintest crack, the glass shattering between us. The chemical inside spilled into the earth, sizzling as it mixed with the rain. A sharp, acrid smell filled the air. Vivian froze, staring at the ruined syringe as if she'd just watched her soul break apart. "No," she whispered. "It was perfect. It was all I had left." I pushed myself up, shaking, chest heaving. "You can't bring her back," I said, voice raw. "She's gone, and this—" I gestured to myself, to the muddy ground between us. "This was never her. This was me." She lifted her gaze to mine. For the first time, I didn't see a scientist, or a savior, or a villain. I saw a woman who had lost everything and refused to accept it. "She was my sister," Vivian whispered. "My only family. I couldn't let her die." "You did," I said softly. You killed her the moment you stopped letting her go. Vivienne's shoulders slumped. Her body seemed to collapse in on itself, her sobs muffled by the rain. She was all I had, she repeated, over and over, like a prayer to something that had already stopped listening. I looked down at her, at the woman who had created me, who had stolen my past, my identity, my right to simply exist without question. I expected to feel rage, but instead all I felt was sorrow. She had lived her life trying to conquer death. I was going to live mine by learning to accept it. I turned away from her and walked toward the base of the willow, where Lara's diary still lay open, pages rippling in the storm. I picked it up, pressing it to my chest, and glanced once more at Vivienne. She was still kneeling in the mud, staring at the shattered syringe as if the world had ended. Maybe, for her, it had. The rain softened to a mist as the first light of dawn began to break through the clouds. The willow leaves glistened gold and silver, trembling gently in the morning breeze. I took the silver locket from around my neck, the one that had started all of this, and placed it beside Ilara's diary. The spiral engraved on its surface caught the light one last time, gleaming faintly before being swallowed by shadow. With my hands still raw from the fight, I began to dig. The earth was soft, and the smell of rain mixed with the metallic tang of soil. I dug until the hole was deep enough, then lowered the diary and the locket into the ground together, mother and memory, side by side. "I'm sorry," I whispered, "but it's time to rest." I covered them gently, pressing the earth flat until the spiral on the locket disappeared beneath the mud. For a long time, I just sat there under the willow, listening to the wind move through the branches. For once, the whispers didn't sound like voices. They sounded like peace. When I finally turned back, Vivienne was gone. The clearing was empty except for the faint imprint of her knees in the mud and the broken glass glinting faintly in the new light. I didn't look for her. Some ghosts weren't meant to be found again. Weeks later, the ocean air of Windmere Bay felt cleaner somehow, the sky bluer, the days brighter. I packed my things and left the little white house by the dunes without saying goodbye. June didn't stop me. She knew I had to go. I moved inland to a small apartment above a gallery in a quiet city where no one knew my name. The days passed quietly, filled with the sound of pencils, scratching, and brushes sweeping over canvas. I started painting again, but not like before. Not landscapes or portraits for tourists. I painted what I remembered. Fragments of a willow tree, a silver locket, a woman's eyes filled with sorrow and love. Sometimes I painted Ilara's smile. Other times I painted my own reflection, blurred between who I was and who I'd become. I didn't need to choose between them anymore. The nightmares stopped too. No more lullabies in the dark. No more whispers calling me back to someone else's past. When I dreamed, it was only of the ocean, the waves rolling endlessly, cleansing everything they touched. For the first time, the silence inside me wasn't empty. It was peaceful. One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, I locked up the gallery and walked to the river nearby. The water glowed gold in the fading light, and for a moment I thought I saw a reflection of the willow swaying in the ripples. Maybe it was just my imagination. Maybe not. I smiled faintly, touching the small scar on my wrist where Vivienne's syringe had grazed me. It had healed almost completely, leaving just a faint mark. A reminder, but not a wound. I took a deep breath, the air crisp and cool against my lungs. "My name is Nora Quinn," I said quietly, the words steady and sure. It felt good to say it aloud. "I'm not Ilara. I'm not Vivienne's experiment. I'm me." And for the first time, I looked out at the horizon where the river met the setting sun. I belonged to no one but myself. The last of the light shimmered across the water, and in that moment I finally felt what I'd been chasing all along. Not the past, not the truth, but freedom. When the truth finally came out, it didn't bring peace right away. It brought silence. The kind that follows after a storm when all that's left is the wreckage of what you used to believe. I buried the diary, the locket, and every lie that chained me to the past. I wasn't Ilara's echo or Vivienne's experiment anymore. My name is Nora Quinn, and for the first time in my life, I'm finally free to live as me. Some stories don't end with truth. They begin with it. If this one stayed with you, take a moment to share it. Maybe someone out there needs to hear it too. And tell me, if you discovered your entire life was built on someone else's lies, would you still want to know the truth or keep living the lie?